Good evening, and welcome to the Commemorative Air Force Warbird Tube webinar for this evening. I'm your host, Steve Buss. I'm glad that you could join us tonight. This webinar series is made possible by the Commemorative Air Force, and you can support the CAF through membership or donations. And for details on how you can further CAF's mission to educate, inspire, and honor, please visit our website, commemorativeairforce.org. Now, as you enjoy tonight's presentation, some questions may come to mind. You can just type those in the chat box or in the comment section, depending on if you're on Facebook or YouTube, and they will relay the questions to me, and I will relay them to our guests. And speaking of guests, from the Military Aviation Museum in Virginia Beach, Virginia, is the museum director, Keegan Chetwynd, and chief pilot of the museum, Mike Spauling. Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having us.
So tonight we want to talk about that beautiful airplane that's sitting right behind you, and that is the Wooden Wonder, the de Havilland Mosquito. And we just want to talk first about the kind of the history of the airplane, and we'll talk about this specific airplane, but let's get into a little bit of your backgrounds first. Mike, I understand you have quite a few hours of flying time, 15,000 plus, in quite a few different aircraft, including Warbirds. How did you get involved in aviation?
Aviation itself, my dad was a private pilot and drug me out to the airport quite a bit. We sit there and watch airplanes take off and land, and joined Civil Air Patrol when I was 14 years old, and soloed when I was 16 in the Civil Air Patrol, and built a lot of time there doing that, and eventually just flew professionally, flight instructing, until I worked my way up to being a corporate jet pilot.
And how about getting into the Warbirds?
Warbirds, I had some of my own airplanes. I'd always been fascinated with the Stearman. I have a Stearman myself. I've had for quite a while, and it ended up with a T6. I had that for a while, along with some other non-Warbird tailwheel airplanes. And then I met a couple guys that were flying a Lockheed Lodestar and CAF, and that got me into CAF and flying bigger Warbird airplanes, the Lockheed Lodestar and the Grumman Tracker you had back then, and then I met this group here with Jerry Yegan when he started his collection there, and timing is everything.
It certainly is. And Keegan, you may be, for some of our viewers, are going to be a familiar face. We worked together at CAF, and now you moved on to bigger and better things with the museum out in Virginia Beach.
Yeah, it's been 2 years now that I've been out in Virginia Beach. I did have a stint in San Diego in between, but it's great to be back here in Dallas. We have to be here for an event with the Mosquito. When this opportunity came up to jump on the webinar with you, it's kind of cool to be back and see so many people that were, kind of family that brought me up in the CAF and got me exposed to Warbirds and created some great opportunities. So I think, we were both talking about it earlier, and it was a little bit of an opportunity to give back and kind of talk a little bit about how the CAF kind of put us both on a trajectory to get to work with some really interesting and unique airplanes. We probably should say that we're here at the Telling Restoration Hangar at the national headquarters for the CAF, and we've got the back doors open. So if you hear jet noise or the helicopter, that's what's going on. So we'll try to work around it best we can, but we really wanted to have the Mosquito there in shot for you in the background, as opposed to doing it from a conference room, since the airplane was here.
Indeed, and there's nothing better than being at an airport, whether it's daytime or nighttime. So good. So let's talk a little bit about the history of the Mosquito itself in World War II.
Yeah, so I think Mosquitoes are a really interesting, fascinating airplane. They got the nickname the Wooden Wonder. The airplane's almost entirely wooden construction, birch and spruce, used extensively in the construction of the airplane. You can't see wood grain on the fuselage necessarily, because there's a linen top coat that goes down over that before the paint's applied and everything. But it is a really remarkable airplane. I think, Mike, probably you have interesting perspective from being up there inside the cockpit. It's a single pilot airplane. It looks like it might not be, but it is, and it's kind of a lot there for one person to manage with those two Merlins.
Yes, it can be. As far as flying it, it's kind of another airplane, but it isn't. It is a single pilot airplane, but there's a seat that sits a little farther back on this model. That's a navigator seat, whatever they happen to use them for. They had all sorts of things. They have a bomb sight on it that slides out front, and then the bombardier would come up and look down through that when they were on bombing missions. So that was really the purpose of the other seat, is to do whatever the mission called for while the pilot just flew the airplane. So it is a single pilot airplane.
So we've got John trying to use the phone camera to kind of give a view inside the airplane up there into the cockpit. And you can kind of see the pilot's seat right there. And you mentioned that second position there.
Yes, you can see it there on the right, and it does sit back behind him. So like when you're sitting there flying the airplane, the other person is a little bit behind you, about half a leg length behind you. So
It's kind of an interesting thing from the war. The British and just a shortage of pilots really drove a lot of considerably powerful large airplanes to be kind of single pilot airplanes. I've heard that said about the Lancaster and the Mosquito. It's definitely the case as well.
Yep.
As we're looking at the airplane itself, just give us a little more history into it. I mean, it was probably the fastest aircraft of World War II.
I think on speaking to how fast it is, Mike, what's been your experience of that?
Of course, we don't push it hard like they
Right.
did. We only have one. They had thousands. So, but it is very fast. It likes to go fast. It's a much better flying airplane when you are going fast. You get below 200 miles per hour, and it's very sluggish. It takes a lot of control movement to get a little bit of actual tone out of it. When it gets over 200, it's much more fighter-like, and it's very quick and nimble, and it just much better handling airplane fast. It was designed to go fast, and it does that well. And it'll get its big thing was it could go drop its load and turn around and run, and nothing could catch it. So it was good to be a Mosquito pilot.
It's a pretty amazingly versatile platform too. When you read about what it's doing in the war, this particular platform had just this expansive multi-role profile. The airplane behind us is the fighter bomber variant. There is bomb bays in it, but you can see the assortment of guns in the nose. The ones that stick out the front are 303 caliber, basically a 30 caliber machine gun, and then you got the cannons in the belly. That wasn't common to all Mosquitoes. There were some with glass noses. There were Pathfinder airplanes equipped with oboe. There were aircraft
night fighters.
Yeah, there was a passenger version of the Mosquito too. There were several operated as an airline connection to neutral countries in Europe because the Luftwaffe couldn't catch them. So I don't know that it would be a particularly comfortable ride. You'd have to be really committed to the idea of the passenger ride inside the fuselage. But there is a hatch back there that you can kind of crawl inside and, I guess, hypothetically stay in there for a long duration.
So as a high-speed twin-engine multi-use bomber reconnaissance aircraft, it would be sort of similar to the A-26 in the American arsenal, although I think the Mosquito is, at the risk of insulting the A-26 fans, it's a little sexier looking airplane than the A-26.
I think I'll help you out here, Steve. It is unequivocally the better airplane. That's not just because we don't have a flying A-26 and we love the Mosquito, but it's truly a remarkable piece of machinery. The way that the war was fought was changed by the Mosquito. The A-26 continued in a theme, kind of continued to expand upon mission capabilities and things like that existed. When the Mosquito came in, it created missions for itself. The Mosquito is one of the few airplanes that went back the other way. We gave tons of airplanes to the British to do different things with, but we wanted Mosquitoes back. We did have the opportunity, several American units did fly them, particularly in photographic reconnaissance roles. So that really is a testament to the capability and just suitability of the airplane to a range of missions that we would actually be seeking them. It didn't happen in great quantity, but compared to American airplanes, the Mosquito was not built in great quantity necessarily.
So let's talk a little bit about the construction. Knowing that the British did not have a wealth of raw materials, especially early in World War II, this is almost let's build something out of what we have, but they really created something remarkable in the Mosquito.
Yeah, John, if you want to walk the camera back towards the engines there and give people a chance to kind of see it. The need to preserve war essential materials meant that a lot of the airplane was wood. Again, we mentioned the wood construction earlier, but there is metal used in strategic and essential places around the engines and so on. John's showing you there the nacelle on the aircraft. Mike, when you're flying it, does it handle different being wooden?
No, you wouldn't have any idea if you didn't know for any reason. It's supposed to be lighter, but it's a big airplane. It's a heavy airplane to start with. Over 20,000 pounds gross, and it acts like it till it gets 200 mile an hour, as I was mentioning. But you wouldn't have any idea that it's wood. You don't see it. It's you don't feel it. It's there. There's a lot of armor plating inside, so it has a metal airplane feel.
The interesting thing I think about the wood comes to the maintenance and upkeep of the airplane now. It's it's something we keep it indoors every night. When it's back home in Virginia Beach, it definitely spends every night inside. The airplane, we have to care for it as a wooden airplane, and although it's heavy and big and it belongs in the World War II hangar with everything else, we can't necessarily give it this. It doesn't have the same leeway that a Mustang or a metal airplane provides. Just in terms of upkeep, having carpenter's tools on hand is a difference with managing a wooden airplane. The bulk of the work that it took to rebuild this Mosquito really was rooted in recreating those construction techniques to achieve what needed to be achieved with the wood. So that was a kind of a really interesting thing. It took better than 10 years or almost 10 years to get the airplane up and flying. And that was a lot of investment in recreating and reconstructing the technology that allowed the airplane to be constructed in the first place.
Well, so many of the warbirds that we enjoy today found life after the war, having some kind of role that could be fulfilled. The Mosquito really didn't. So there's very few examples of the airframe that exists. Talk about this specific airframe and there a little bit about the restoration.
So this airplane, in a kind of an interesting way, its post-war life was defined by its stint as a playhouse. So this airplane was built in early 1945. It was built at the Downsview factory outside Toronto in Canada. The airplane never went overseas. It stayed there in Canada, and in April 1948, it was transferred for disposal as a war asset. The airplane ended up on a farm out in Milo, Alberta, and in the 70s, it was acquired by a gentleman named Ed Zaleski. His kids, April and Mark, have told stories about how they used to use it as a playhouse. That accounts for the largely intact status of the airplane over those years. Was there on the farm field, it just kind of stayed. Wooden components deteriorated and things like that, but the airplane largely stayed together with parts and components there. Naturally, the process of restoration meant that parts did have to come from other places as well. Some of them did originate in a CAF parts building, other places like that. They were come by perfectly honestly, but everyone out there had small pieces to need to contribute to making the first of the flying Mosquitoes. I think it's been joined now by 3 others, right? There are 4 total?
There are 4 total. 2 more have been totally restored like this one, and the other one was just sort of refurbished in its original state and flown once and probably won't fly again.
Okay.
So,
those others that were restored kind of went on the patterns and jigs and the knowledge and know-how that were used to produce this one. I think we mentioned it earlier when it first flew in 2012. It was the only flying one in the world. And Steve, you and I went and saw it up at Oshkosh. I went to Warbirds in Review, and I didn't realize it then, but Mike and everyone else was there and kind of showing off the airplane. So I think it's a pretty incredible piece of equipment. We acquired it in 2004. Ed Zaleski's original intent had been to restore it as part of a museum in Canada. The acquisition on our part saw the airplane transported to New Zealand to complete the restoration in Ardmore at AvSpec. They really, again, they continue to hold the knowledge base necessary to build Mosquitoes, which is an incredible thing to have that back in the world.
Where was the restoration that for this airplane? It actually didn't take place here in the States. It was actually overseas, correct?
Right. Yeah. So Abspecs did the restoration. They're located in New Zealand. Those of you that are familiar with our collection, we do have a lot of airplanes that tend to go outside the United States for restoration. We do have a handful of them that get restored here. A lot of that has to do with shop bandwidth and who has available space where we can see the airplanes finished up. Um, it's kind of cool. The airplane's paint scheme is a New Zealand squadron from World War II, the 487th Squadron. They were New Zealand pilots that were kind of brought into the Royal Air Force as part of a training program that was set up to help supplement the numbers of British pilots that there were in Europe. The Commonwealth countries, particularly New Zealand, Australia, and Canada, were asked to conduct training there in their country, assemble squadrons, basically equip them with aircraft, and be able to dispatch them to Europe. And that's very much what happened with this squadron. It had a Maori motto. It was very much a New Zealand squadron, but operating as part of the RAF. That's what the fuselage codes were that John was showing you back there, that kind of characteristic camouflage. It made for, I think, a really fitting tribute to the effort that the New Zealanders put into getting this airplane flying. Anything more we can say on that, Steve, let us know.
Sure. No, I'd go ahead and expand on it, but yeah, it really is a gorgeous restoration. And Mike, I guess the question is, with 7,800 mosquitoes were produced, and there's only 4 that are out there right now. How does one learn how to fly an airplane that you're kind of getting into for the first time? I mean, what was the process of learning how to fly the Mosquito?
That's typical in any single fighter going to be, but this was pretty different because it's a twin engine airplane and because one hadn't flown in decades. So believe it or not, there's a guy, George Stewart, up in Canada, who flew them and instructed in them in China, and he's still around. He's in his 90s, and this was back in 2013. But sharp as a tack and could tell you everything about it and what to do and what not to do. Also, the gentleman that flew it over in New Zealand, he also flew it for the first time, and we never spoke, but we just communicated by email, and he wrote down little notes of what he saw on it, and it was really almost like you'd already flown it. It didn't do anything other than what they said it would do. But to do that, you get in it and you sit in the airplanes and you get really comfortable in the cockpits and start it, taxi it around a little bit, get blessed by the FAA. They say you can actually take it off, and there's nothing left to do but go fly. It's all a numbers thing.
You make it sound so simple.
Thinking that too. I'm kind of like, yeah, I've watched of them climbing in the airplane and just kind of putting the airplane back on, as it were. You mentioned you didn't have a chance to fly it over in New Zealand. What was it like having the airplane arrive here? It was shipped here in crates, in fact, specially manufactured crates to hold the wing. Can you describe what its arrival here in the States was like, and what it felt like to be a part of that?
Sure. Yeah, it was really interesting. It did come in parts. The wing is a one piece wing. It doesn't have bolts on like each side like most airplanes do. It's one solid wooden piece. The old wing, they actually cut it and shipped it over, and they had to build a special container to ship it back. And it really only assembles in just a few pieces. They're big, and I'm not to say it just throws together, but it was quite interesting to see it all come separate. And the guys came over that had built it, came over to help reassemble it, and it didn't take that long. And it was nice to see how it was put together because it's a very well built airplane. And but then to run it and go fly it was just and seeing one that hadn't flown in a long time in the U.S. and again decades, it was pretty powerful thing.
I think the breadth of magazine articles written about the airplane would attest to the fact that I think the whole world was excited to see the airplane fly. I think it's the question I posed to you was, what was it like to be a part of that at the staff and operations level? But I think it was so much bigger. Before we started up, Steve, you and I were talking about We went to see the airplane up in Oshkosh, and that was a cool treat for everyone to get to see it. Now it does keep a regular flying schedule at our museum in Virginia Beach. So we do a great event called Summer of Flight during the summer months. We're on a turf strip, so once the winter weather sets in, the moisture content in the ground goes up. We don't have as much operability on our runway. But flying on it during the summer months, every Saturday at 1 o'clock, we put a different airplane on the schedule, and we've got over 30 flying Warbirds there at the facility. But the Mosquito is always special. It's always interesting to hear, how far people have come to see it. The last time we flew it, we had a visitor from 7 hours away who had found out about it on Facebook and just wanted to be a part of the excitement of seeing a Mosquito fly. Which is a really special treat for people. It's a cool airplane. We love to get people up close to it and give people the chance to kind of look around it. Our museum is devoid of ropes to really keep people away from the airplanes. We do ask people don't touch and climb on them. Obviously wooden surfaces and things like that on the Mosquito are very delicate, but it's definitely a cool thing to get to see it fly. Mike, one of the things I think that's kind of interesting is you mentioned there were notes passed along to you about flying the Mosquito and what that entails. Is there anything in particular that stood out to you? Is there sage advice for anyone out there who's about to climb into a Mosquito for the first time? What is the thing you must know?
That it does not want to go straight when you want first take off. So they tore a lot of them up during the war before they ever got off the ground. And it's usually the initial power up to start out, and they call it swing. This tail would swing and off it would go and into the weeds. And again, we only have one, so we can't do that. So they just give them another one. So one of the big things that came from George Stewart that he found out was that if you brought the power up to zero boost, which for people who don't know, that's the British terminology for manifold pressure. So 30 inches of manifold pressure is zero boost on there. So you would bring it up to that, hold the brakes, and then release it, and all the way up to 14 pounds of boost, full power within a couple lengths of the airplane moving, and the tail is already coming up. So now you have some rudder authority, and that really seems to be the trick to keep it straight. And after that, it's an airplane. It's a pretty heavy airplane. It has a lot of drag on the ground. It gets to rotate at 125 miles per hour. It gets to 100 really fast, and it takes that long or longer to get that next 25 mile an hour. It just has a lot of drag. So you get it off the ground. And then it's slow to accelerate, so you want to get the gear up really quick. It has a very high VMC, which is a single engine performance number for people who aren't familiar with that, which is 190 miles per hour, which is really high. That's not real number for us here because we fly it much lighter than they did. That number really is when they were loaded down and max gross at over 20,000 pounds. So it will fly slower than that on one engine. I've shut it down. You have to do it. Take a check ride in the airplane, and it'll fly around 140, 145. But it doesn't like it. It doesn't like that slow even on two engines. So you kind of have to be careful.
Well, as we're looking at the airplane, I just want to go back to you mentioned the fact that it's a one-piece wing, which means that the wing itself is actually cutting through the cockpit. How does that affect the way you're seated, or the navigator bombardier is that position is within the airplane?
Yeah, it's behind you, and you're kind of sitting up almost on top of the spar, and the radiators and all right, on the leading edges of the spars, right up, right there, between each. It heats up fast on the ground, and the radiator doors you see right underneath the bottom there. It's big. It doesn't open very much, but it will let a lot of air go through there. But on the ground, it will overheat fast, kind of like a Spitfire would or anything like that. But so you got to get it started and get it in the air fairly quickly.
Steve, we're going to mute for a second. I think we've got something getting ready to taxi on by here that's fairly loud. Or are they just running it up? All right. Well, we'll go along with it until it comes by. But
It's not too bad yet, so we're still good.
tell us.
So with to talk a little bit about the engines, the Merlin engines that are on the airplane.
These are Merlin 25s. They're a little bit different because they have pressure carburetors, and they you don't have any mixture controls or anything with them, and they're very easy to start. They're just float carburetors, and you just basically turn the fuel on and prime it like you would any Merlin. Hit the start button, and it goes about 2.5, 3 blades. It'll do a little quiver, and that's when you know it's going to start, and it starts and runs. The different model Merlins, like on a P-51 or a Hurricane or a Spitfire or something like that, you got to hold your tongue just right, do just the right amount of this, just the right amount of that, and hopefully you'll do it. It'll get a good start. But these things start right up and they run. But because they are float carburetors, you have to be careful about pulling positive G's or negative G's, and that's how we lost that last one over in Europe many years ago when they ported the carburetors and they lost both engines doing a roll. So, and it will happen. I've played with it a little bit, and it doesn't really do it. I felt it cough one time, but so it doesn't like to go, you know, pushing the nose over. Uh, so it's other than that, it's a Merlin engine. Yeah.
So, and again, this was never designed to be a fighter aircraft, a dogfighter. It was more in the bombing and reconnaissance vein. So, to think about doing aggressive combat maneuvers really probably was not in the design scheme for the airplane.
In kind of an interesting way, that goes to that multi-role capability. The airplane, uh, the airplane was absolutely designed as a fast bomber. There was a sort of competing school of thought between whether or not you up armor a bomber and put a bunch of additional defensive armament and everything on it, or if you try to take everything you possibly can off of it, make it go as fast as it possibly can. The design team that was working on this airplane was kind of almost laughed out of the room on the subject of a bomber being fast enough to evade a fighter until it showed itself to be the case. So the Mosquito became very capable, and yeah, the ability to dogfight was not necessarily designed into the aircraft, but something that it was found to be capable of doing. I think probably one of the coolest missions that they performed was as Pathfinders, flying at night over Europe and pinpointing the location of German cities and target areas. Obviously, we were bombing in the daytime. We had the ability to see, look down and see, hey, here's where we're bombing. The British didn't necessarily do that. The bombers didn't all fly in formation. They didn't have the ability to look straight down and see what they were supposed to attack. So they had to do it in a much more complicated way. The Mosquitoes would fly over the target and drop colored flares that would indicate the direction over the drop zone and everything for the Lancasters that were flying kind of in trail all the way across to Germany. So really kind of a cool thing that these were just out zooming around the bomber stream, dropping these colored flares, evading enemy flak, and doing all of this using onboard systems to figure out exactly where they were, providing that navigation function. So we keep going back to the speed of the airplane, but you obviously can't make that work and can't be doing it unless you're in a really capable platform.
Have you had the opportunity to meet any Mosquito pilots, either at an air show or at the museum?
Yeah, there's a couple others. I was the first one rated in the U.S., but there are several since there are a couple other airplanes out there now, and um, uh, really big name guys. Steve Hinton, fly them, and Stu Dawson, those guys.
Have you met any veteran pilots that flew them? I mean, like while you're up at Oshkosh?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I no, I have a lot of people say my dad flew them or something like that, but I haven't actually. Maybe up in Hamilton, they did have an event there when we took the airplane up there one time. There was that one guy who came up and he actually gave me his pilot manual that he had, in the war for the airplanes. It's pretty cool, but they're only like that big. There's very little information in them. It's really amazing how much they did with very little information. So
what does the first page say? Front towards enemy.
Yeah, yeah. So other than that, I really haven't. It's mostly somebody who knew somebody or somebody in their family.
I think one of the things that's really cool is people over in the UK do follow the airplane. So we hear a lot from people, an affinity base around the world for the airplane. For people that got to see it fly in New Zealand, it was really a special opportunity. When we post about it on Facebook, people load up their photos from down in New Zealand or photos over in the UK of grandparents getting ready to fly the airplanes during the war and things like that. I've had the opportunity to meet a couple of Mosquito pilots actually while I was with the CAF. There was one guy lived here in Texas who came up and flew with us in the R4D, who later spent some time with Rod Lewis's, then Rod Lewis's Mosquito. But it's been I think a really interesting thing to see. How to put it together.
Growing up in the U.S., growing up to eventually be a pilot, everybody dreamed of flying P-51s and Corsairs. That was the big thing. That's what we knew. When you go up to Canada, you go over UK, up, it was the Mosquito that you dreamed of flying, whether you thought you'd ever fly or not. But they were like, "Oh no, it was a Mosquito. That's what we had to fly."
Steve, we got an alert over here saying that we had an unstable internet connection. Are we doing all right there, as far as you can tell?
Yeah, it dropped out a little bit for a moment, but you're back now.
I think, in case you missed it, what Mike was saying was that for people in the Commonwealth countries particularly, this is one of those airplanes they dream of flying. Usual thing.
No, not really. Systems are like a Spitfire or Hurricane with air systems for brakes. You use it, but in general, it's another airplane, different numbers, and that type of thing. But it just takes some special management to understand that if you let it get away from you, or if you don't pay attention, it really will bite you. It's not a forgiving airplane if you get behind it.
So
And
flying it all, flying it part of the day today. So tired here and the airplanes here in Dallas, and came all the way here from Virginia. You were up there flying it around today. Is there anything you can relate about that experience of just being up there in it? Flying it. You had Ken Yeagan with you, the son of our museum's founder, and he'd never ridden in it before.
Yeah.
Maybe can you share a little bit about like the experience today flying it?
Sure. It's always it's a very easy airplane when you put somebody in it and you can say that very, very, very likely you're the only one in the Mosquito today. But we're flying by them.
I think we're having a little trouble with the connection.
Where it goes,
there it
everywhere
goes.
it goes, and very familiar with what we missed.
Did we ever? Should we shut down that other phone that's connected to the Wi-Fi, and maybe that'll help us, Steve? What do you think?
Yeah, we could try that. Yeah, I don't give it a shot. I've got some photos here of mosquitoes. We can use as background. if Leah can make the switch.
How's it going now? Better?
Sounds that way. So, Mike, you were talking about the flight today with the founder's son, and we kind of fuzzed out at that point.
He's not a pilot, but it was his first flight in the Mosquito, and yeah, he couldn't stop talking about it. It's quite an experience. It is very different. Of course, he has flown in,
All right, I guess that there. Well, let's see if they're coming back.
We
yeah.
want to try to mute this video and maybe come back and you share some pictures of the airplane, or
Sure. Let's go ahead. Maybe we can just pick up your audio. All right, we've got some photos. We're actually looking at well, if we've got the we can share my screen. We can see we've got some photos of the Mosquito actually flying.
yeah, Steve, if you'll put those up and maybe transition a little early to Q&A. We're sorry about the connectivity problems, but we are trying to do it here in the
Yeah, airports are probably the last place that gets decent internet connections these days.
Our airport agrees with you on that.
So let's see here. There we go. You should see.
That one was taken last year. Silicon brought a photography crew out to the museum, and Mike, pretty sure that's you flying it.
Yep, that was me.
And again, as we're waiting for their audio to come back up, if you have any questions, go ahead and put them.
I like having a second person, and particularly if you're going to fly formation, because you're just stuck looking outside, and other things that can lose, since it's your brakes. Sorry, your steering.
And I believe we've lost them all the way here. So anyway, we're looking at the Mosquito from Military Aviation Museum. This is probably Mike flying the airplane, so you can see what the view is. We kind of saw the inside view a little bit with the remote camera, but this is a little better picture where you can actually see the controls, and very amazingly for a twin engine aircraft, a very small cockpit area. There really isn't a lot of space in there. Is something you might see in a B-25 Mitchell or the A-26. And remember, the pilot, as he's sitting there, he has someone who's actually behind him, either as a navigator or bombardier or a reconnaissance officer. So it is very small, especially for as large as the airplane is.
Steve, can you hear us now? We've disabled the video, but hopefully you can hear us.
Yes, I can hear you guys. We're actually looking at a photo of the from the interior of the cockpit, kind of looking over the pilot's shoulder.
So we were asking about me preferring to take somebody with us. I usually give them, whether they're a pilot or not, I'll give them a job. It's another set of eyes inside while you're having a look outside, because there's some things that you need. And if you have a little bit of warning that you're losing, like your air controls your brakes, which is your steering on the ground. So I will tell them to watch this air gauge. If it starts to go down, which it shouldn't be doing, it stays always pegged out. But if it starts to go down, let me know, so we can start heading back to the airport and get it on the ground before we lose all our air. So, and engine gauges and things like that, because when you're in formation, you're just constantly looking outside. So it's nice to have another set of eyes that can that can kind of keep an eye on those things on this aircraft. And also, you can't see below you. You're kind of sitting up on top of the wings inside in the cell, so you can't see out or down. And in formation, if somebody gets below you, you have to just get out because you can lose them really easy. So you have to always stay below. So looking around, if somebody is below you at all, the other person can help you find them when you need to get them or to try to find your way back to them. So it's always good to have another set of eyes. It can be flown, and we have flown at single pilot, we do. But it's just a small comfort to be able to give somebody a job, and it makes them feel good that they're helping the watch.
You mentioned an air system on the airplane. Can you describe what the air system does on the Mosquito?
Yeah, it controls the brakes, which is also your steering on the ground, and it controls the doors for the coolant outside, and it's controlled by a hand brake, just kind of like a brake on a bicycle. And as you move your feet back and forth, it goes to a diverter valve and it allows more air. The more you pull it, the more air you get. And as you move your feet back and forth, it diverts air to one side or the other. So it's kind of a little dance you do, and lightly touching the handbrake and moving your feet to keep it straight and to make sure you don't put too much on it and your rudder's off to one side and it'll pull it. So it's a little bit of something different than you normally have to deal with in an American airplane for sure. But you learn to manage it and do what you got to do.
You mentioned this being a British airplane, different than an American airplane. What are some of the other kind of challenges that the Mosquito brings as far as maintenance and upkeep of the airplane?
Probably a better question for John.
Hey, John, you want to come tell us how difficult it is to maintain a British airplane? So John flew out here with us. John's one of the maintainers that works specifically on the Mosquito. He's a member of the fighter factory staff out in Virginia Beach. Working on British airplanes is a kind of a specialized thing. Can you tell us a little more about it?
Special tools. You can look at, most aircraft nowadays, and you can figure out what it is by looking at it. British, you have 3 different tool sets you have to actually go look at. So that's always a fun part of the job. And finding parts, although some of them are easy to find, a lot of them are over in England, so you have to figure out when you can call over there and find out they have them and get them over here, because a lot of the stuff in the States you just can't call a normal place and get British stuff. So it's definitely a challenge on the British stuff, trying to get it fixed or serviced. That's for sure. Engines the easy part. Everything else is the difficult part.
What's been the biggest challenge that you've faced with keeping this airplane flying? I mean, you're out in Virginia Beach. You're just a couple of miles from the ocean. So, I mean, is the salt air, does that factor into your maintenance plans as well?
Generally on this aircraft, we don't have a lot of issues with the salt air. We haven't run into any issues. Everything's sealed up on the wood and painted, and so we don't have any issues with it messing with the wood. Light corrosion on some of the metal stuff, that's every other metal aircraft, so it's not really a huge challenge. I don't know what the biggest difficulty is other than engine work. I mean,
I would say one of the challenges that presented a difficulty for the airplane that had it down for a period of time was the exhaust stacks on the airplane. So actually, if you look at that right there, where the exhausts are sticking out, there's a special one at the aft end of it. And maybe, John, you can describe that for us. But having that made was a kind of an involved process, and it took a number of years to get a replacement set made that was prepared to withstand the intense heat that's being redirected to avoid kind of burning up the wing, right?
Right. So the picture you're looking at is some of those they're obviously 5 exhaust stacks, and the very back one is actually a 2-into-1. So you have number 5 and number 6 cylinder going into one, and because of the where the air is, or the exhaust air coming out of there, it's really abusive to the part you actually can't see the curve. And we had original mild steel from World War II, and they were just corroding, obviously because of the salt air and the exhaust gases and everything. So they're eating through there, and we finally just had to not really down the aircraft for long, but we had to figure out something. So we kind of stopped flying it for a while to figure out where we could get exhaust stack wise, so we didn't have to keep repairing little holes, because you repair one, you'd fly it and you'd have 2 more pop up on another exhaust or the same one. We finally found someone that would actually make them just like they were, but better metals, more modern metals. And we've had them for about a year now and haven't had any issues, and they look great. They keep their color. They're not all corroded, and can't thank people enough to actually put all the work into actually getting the structure built to actually make these, and they can actually make more when they.
If anyone else out there needs them for their mosquitoes,
Yeah.
I think a lesson learned that the original World War II parts, when it started to burn through, you just throw that one in a pile and go get another one. That you can't do anymore with mosquito exhausts.
Yeah, it's so true with many warbirds, and obviously there are only a few mosquitoes out there, but with some of the other aircraft, B-17s, for example, you see a lot of the owners and operators kind of getting together and pooling their resources to be able to get some of these rare or hard to recreate parts put together for the fleet to keep as many of the airplanes flying as possible. And you mentioned the fighter factory. Let's talk just a little bit about what the fighter factory does in support of the museum there in Virginia Beach.
So the Fighter Factory is a specialized team of professional mechanics that all they do is maintain our inventory of Warbirds. They don't work on other aircraft on a contract basis. They don't work on your average GA airplane. They really do just work on the Warbirds in the Military Aviation Museum collection. So it's a group of really passionate, dedicated people that I think share a commitment that you guys know well in the CAF, which is not just to maintain the airplanes, but to know the history, to be able to read the manual, to have that passion and excitement about the airplanes, so that you can do what it takes to keep these airplanes flying. I think probably a bunch of the folks listening in, you know what it takes to keep the airplanes in your unit flying. Multiply that across a fleet the size of ours. It really is a full-time job for quite a few folks down at the Fighter Factory to basically pull the airplanes in through an annual cycle, but also tackle the kind of maintenance issues that emerge, with these airplanes. You can annual them and they can be perfect, and then, a few months down the line, you can have an issue emerge that needs to be kind of addressed with surplus parts stockpiles, ordering parts, and in fact building some things as well.
If we could just back up for a moment, I know you talked a little bit about the markings of the airplane. One of our viewers was wondering what the significance of the numbers and the colors on the tail of the Mosquito are.
Sure. So KA114 is this particular airplane. That's its serial number, like you would have on the tail of an American airplane. The British just have letters in their serial numbers too. The 3 colored stripes on the tail is a recognition aid. It's kind of a flash color that the British believe helped in the recognition and identification of Allied aircraft. The markings that you have on the airplane are the RAF markings that were common to Mosquitoes in that period, and to the Royal New Zealand Air Force squadron that this one pays tribute to. The EGY markings, that's specifically, although the squadron identifier code there is correct for the 487th, the New Zealanders put the Y on there for Jaeger. So there wouldn't normally have been a Y fuselage code in a typically sized squadron during the war, but Elaine and Jerry Yeagan. The initials just kind of lined up with a historic squadron code as well.
Well, that's good. And, Elaine and Jerry have been very instrumental in putting this collection together.
Hang on one second.
Yep. So Keegan mentioned Elaine and Jerry Yeagan. They are the founders of the Military Aviation Museum in Virginia Beach, and Jerry has been a Warbird enthusiast, Warbird pilot for many, many years. And it was actually Elaine, his wife, who said to him several years ago, "It's why don't you share this collection with the rest of the world? I mean, it's very nice that you have these airplanes, but you should really share them." And that's really where the museum kind of got its start, and it really has continued to grow. And I know we're talking about the Mosquito tonight, and the World War II collection that's at the museum, but they also have a very extensive World War I aircraft collection, some original aircraft from World War I, and some replicas, along with some wonderful other artifacts, including a control tower control facility from an American airfield in England that they had brought over and rebuilt there in Virginia Beach, and they're in the process of restoring that. And it's amazing to walk through that and to feel the history that you feel just being in that space, having transported it from England back over here to the United States. And just a few weeks ago, actually the beginning of October, was the Warbirds Over the Beach show, their annual air show that was going on. And the Mosquito was one of the featured aircraft that was there. And amazing. I've had the privilege to be at a number of air shows and aviation events throughout my career, but seeing the Mosquito fly with a Spitfire and a Hurricane on either wing was something I'd never seen before. And for just a few minutes, I became an air show spectator, just like most of you in the audience, and it was an incredible sight to see, and really a testament not only to to Mike and his crew of pilots at the Military Aviation Museum, but also the fighter factory folks, the mechanics who keep those aircraft flying.
We're back with you, Steve. He's
All right.
back there somewhere. Or we thought that.
Yeah.
The trials and tribulations of doing it. So thank you to everyone for bearing with us. And
Yeah.
Steve, thank you for your kind words about the museum. It really is a special place. I think all of us that go there, we kind of feel drawn to it. Being there on a turf airfield with the original World War II structures amidst a remarkable collection of airplanes. I think we all we feel a draw to be there and to be around the airplanes. And that keeps us all kind of motivated to put in the hours that it takes to keep airplanes like these flying, but also, funded. We've been, we were graciously founded by a man with an incredible collection of airplanes, but a big part of where we're at as an organization is working to expand the base of support for these airplanes. It's Jerry's hope that we'll all be enjoying these airplanes long after he's gone. He wants to see them continue to fly, wants to see them operate as a museum collection, in a way as a gift to all of us, to the Warbird community, but to the American people at large, and really just have the opportunity to enjoy these things the way that he's enjoyed them. So that's a really exciting thing for our organization right now, but I'll let you get back onto questions about airplanes while we've got John here for a couple more minutes.
Sure. Hey, I'm hoping you can see the picture that's up on the screen with the Messerschmitt and the Mosquito. Could you just talk briefly about that little jet that's down there?
Before Mike says anything, there's a quick way to spot Mike Spaulding in the cockpit of any airplane. So he's got this great white helmet with these two roundels on the front with the American star with the meatball in the middle. That's a good way to tell which airplane Mike is in. So that's him flying the Mosquito. And we do have a replica Messerschmitt 262, one of the Legend Flyers aircraft. Mike, this must have been a pretty amazing thing to do, to check your six and find a Messerschmitt back there.
You wouldn't see him where he is because he's below you. And but it is. I can tell you a little bit about the 262 since we're talking about it. It was a lot of the same type thing. Wolfgang is flying that right now. He was the original test pilot for Legend Flyers and flew that airplane and flew all the time off of it before we got it and delivered it to us. So he knows all things ME-262. That's a great airplane. It's got a little more modern engines on it. From the corporate world, that's an old engine, but for 262, it's a modern engine. And CJ610s, they're great airplane. It's a perfect engine for that airplane. So they're pretty straightforward too, as far as jets go, and flies like a jet. There's nothing you do different than flying a corporate jet or an airliner or something like that. The Germans really had it together when they went to pencil and paper and put that into production. It was right the first time. He's leaving.
Thank God.
Sounds like we finally got that airplane to take off.
We were an awful long process.
I don't know what.
I'm not sure how much gas he's got left.
Yeah. So that's the only airplane there that could outrun the Mosquito.
Yeah, that's true.
Yep.
And you mentioned that improvement. It doesn't need the pull start cords.
Correct.
In the nose of the engine they saw. You don't have to pull start it and stand there while the jet starts running and try to figure out how to get all that to work.
Mike, how many hours do you have in the Messerschmitt?
Probably not that many.
Right.
Probably about 35.
Oh, okay.
They're a higher time Messerschmitt current pilots than me.
How about the Mosquito?
A little over 100 hours.
Okay. Yeah. So which one flies better?
They both have their own little quirks. Again, the 262 is a pretty straightforward airplane. It will roll really fast. It doesn't take much stick movement in it, and it goes over. It has a VMC issue too on that one. It's 140 knots, but when you take off, there's a period between 100 where you rotate and get to 140 that you'd have to pull the other engine back to continue flying. But it does a good job. It gets there fairly quickly, much more quickly than the Mosquito gets to its VMC speeds, the single engine speed on takeoff. So they're both very good airplanes.
Spoken like a true chief pilot who loves all of his airplanes, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Which one of these is your favorite?
Yeah.
Right.
That's the question all the time, and I have a lot of different answers for that. The one I'm flying at the moment,
There you
the
go.
one I haven't flown yet. They're all great airplanes. Some of them aren't as comfortable as others, or don't have as good of flying characteristics as others. But I can't say that I really have a favorite.
There you go. Just got a couple of minutes left. Just get your final thoughts, Mike. What's it like to be a part of an organization where you have such a wide variety of aircraft to fly?
It's amazing. It's one of those things you never thought would happen. You couldn't even come up with it on your own, to do it and be part of it. It just sort of happened. Being fortunate enough to have started there when they only had about 3 or 4 airplanes, I thought I had already won the aviation lottery. But Jerry just kept tacking onto that, Mr. Yeagan did, and it just kept growing and growing. And the museum itself wasn't there when I started there, so to build that place and then to move the airplanes over there, and then it just kept growing. It's amazing. And you hear this airplane's coming, that airplane's coming, and more people seem to know about what's coming than I do, because I don't really worry about it until it's time to fly it. so people will tell me, "Well, I hear you got this coming." I say, "I have no idea," but when it shows up on the ramp, then I'll get interested. So.
There you go. Well, and Keegan, what is next? What's coming to Mike's stable next? If you can reveal any secrets.
It's a complex process. We've got a couple of big projects on the go. We really don't announce them publicly until we're ready to talk about them. There are those of you out there that look at people's photos from shops all over the world and spot strange things in the back and go, "Oh God, that's got to be Jerry Higgins, this, that, and the other thing." So that is part of it. There are projects out there that are known. You can kind of look at the research, but none of those are necessarily imminently to be completed projects. I think the one that we're most excited about is the Dauntless that we have right now. We did get a Dauntless recovered from the bottom of Lake Michigan with the ability to own it free and clear from the U.S. Navy, so the airplane can be restored as a flyer. It's been really exciting for us to begin that process. The airplane traveled here from Pensacola, stayed at the museum for a time so that people could have the opportunity to come and view it. Getting it sent out, getting it to the place where they're going to conduct the restoration in New Zealand has been challenging amidst a lot of COVID considerations, and not everyone's back to work yet. And I think we all know there's a shipping and supply line crisis at the moment that's playing havoc with the need to move big pieces of equipment. But for us, it's been really cool because we were able to locate the family of the pilot who was flying it when it crashed in Lake Michigan. We were able to find out that he was okay. He was rescued, but he had been trying to land on the USS Wolverine, one of the paddle wheel aircraft carriers that were built out there for flight training. So we've been able to connect with a lot of really interesting stories through that airplane. And rumor has it, Mike, that there's already a sort of a line among the pilots forming as to who will fly the airplane. It hasn't even been really sent out yet. The wings are at AeroTrader, and there's been a couple updates posted on our Facebook page. The wings are in work, but the fuselage has yet to be started in earnest. So I would say that's what we're really excited about. If you're interested in supporting that project, we do have the ability to adopt our Dauntless. You'll end up with a really cool exclusive patch that goes just to adopters, as well as some additional information on the airplane. You can find out more about that on our website, which Steve has been kind enough to post up there for us. So visit militaryaviationmuseum.org and find out more about that. Definitely like and follow us on Facebook as well. That's a great place where we've been trying to increase our activity basically through COVID. It was a great way for us to keep in connection with the larger Warbird community during a period of time where the museum was closed. So we've kind of gotten into the habit of posting a lot of updates and information about our airplanes, featuring different aircraft from the collection, letting people know when they can come out and see them fly. Unfortunately, we're very near the end of our flying season. In fact, once you all get home tomorrow, that'll pretty much be it. Yep. But we do have a Planes, Trains, and Santa event coming up soon, where Santa will arrive in our Stearman biplane to thrill the children of Virginia Beach, no doubt. So.
Excellent. Well, and again, as Keegan mentioned, if you want to find out more about the Military Aviation Museum, please visit their website. If you're in the Virginia Beach area at all, I do encourage you to take time to carve out a little time out of your vacation and go see the airplanes that are there. It's a really fantastic collection of aircraft with the Military Aviation Museum. And Keegan and Mike, thank you for joining us. And for all of you who've been with us for this last hour, thanks for putting up with some of our technical difficulties. Hopefully you gained some insight into the Mosquito and the operations at the Military Aviation Museum. And again, thank you for being a part of the Warbird Tube webinar. If you have suggestions for a future topic or someone you think we should talk to, please drop Leah Block a note at media@cafhq.org. We'll be back next Wednesday night, 7 o'clock Central Time. Until then, thanks again to Keegan and Mike for joining us from the Military Aviation Museum, live from CAF headquarters in Dallas, Texas. For the Commemorative Air Force, I'm Steve Buss. Have a good night.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay, I stopped the streaming now. We're good.
All right. Well, thank you guys. I hope it works.